Hey everyone, as you can see, this is another real SQL interview problem that was shared to me by Hamim in my email. Straight away, let's understand the problem statement, the given input and the expected output, and then see how we can solve this. So the statement says, imagine a warehouse where available items are stored as per different batches as indicated in the batch table. So there is a batch table. It basically has entry for 3 different batches. Each batch has a quantity. So this means that in batch 1, 5 items are available. In batch 2, 12 items are available. In batch 3, 8 items are available. Okay. Then they are saying customers can purchase multiple items in a single order as indicated in the orders table. Okay. Now there is no customer information here, but there is information about the orders in the orders table. So this basically means order 1 has quantity 2. So what this means is, as part of order 1, 2 items were ordered. As part of order 2, that is O2, 8 items were ordered. O3, 2 items were ordered. O4, 5 items were ordered, and so on and so forth. Okay. Now, what they are asking us to do is to write an SQL query to determine items for each order are taken from which batch. So what this means is we need to write an SQL query to determine the items for each order are taken from which batch. Okay, and they're saying us that we can assume that items are sequentially taken from each batch starting from the first batch. Okay, now let us first understand what exactly this problem is and what they are asking us to do. So we have the batch table. I hope this is clear. We have the orders table. This one also, I hope it is clear. We need to come up with an output that kind of looks something like this. So how do you interpret this input into this output? So let us try to figure that out first. So what this means is, you can see that I have an entry for every order here. So let's say I need to scan through each order. Based on that order and based on the number of items that were ordered as part of that order. So in this case, O1, 2 items were ordered. So I need to figure out these 2 items will be taken from which batch. And they're saying us that when we will be taking the orders, we need to take it sequentially starting from the first batch. So I can say that O1, 2 items for O1 was taken from the batch B1 because it has 5 items available. So out of the 5, 2 are taken as part of O1, and that is what is mentioned here. So O1, B1, 2, right? When I come to the second order, O2, 8 items is needed for this order. Out of this 8, I know that B1 still has 3. Previous order has already taken 2. So out of 5, 2 is gone, 3 is still remaining. So this 3 I can take from B1, right? So that is why for order 2, B1, 3 items were taken. But then this order 2 needs 8. So the remaining 5 are taken from the next batch, that is B2. And that is what is mentioned here. O2, B2, 5. Okay. So now from B2, I can say that 5 items are taken. So 7 is still remaining, right? Then when I go to order 3, it needs 2. So order 3, I can directly take all the 2 from batch B2 because B2 still has 7, right? 5 was taken previously, but 7 is still there. So that is why O3, B2, 2 is taken. Okay. When I come to order 4, 5 is required. Now I know that in B2, 5 is still remaining, right? Because you can see that from B2 here, 5 plus 2, 7 were taken from order 2 and order 3, but 5 is still remaining because it totally had 12. So for order 4, all the 5 that it needed is taken from the batch B2. Okay, and that is what is printed here. When I come to order 5, it needs 9 items. But now I only have batch B3 because B1 and B2 are completely empty because they are all taken from the previous orders. But B3 only has 8, right? So for order 5, out of the 9, 8 will be coming from B3, and that is what is mentioned here. But what about that one remaining item? Okay, that is not mentioned anywhere in the output. And that is why I think this expected output is probably missing one record. Okay, and this can happen in an interview that the expected output might actually not be right. In that case, if you see some typo or some issues, it's always better to indicate this to the recruiter. So in my opinion, ideally there should have been another record for O5. So what I expect this expected output to be is to look something like this. Okay, so I'll say I'm going to create a new record here, and this is going to be O5. And it should probably look something like this. Okay, so this is an additional record that I added here. Okay, so this is something that I can highlight to the recruiter and say that based on the problem statement, based on the input, based on the expected output, I think there should have been another record for O5, and probably it can here indicate 1 or null or whatever they want. So basically, if I go back, O5, the order 5 requires 9 items, 8 are taken from B3, but 1 is remaining, and that 1 I am just going to highlight it has null here. Okay, and then when I come to O6, I know I need 5, but all the batches basically they are empty, there is nothing available, so I'm just indicating that as null, and that is what is mentioned here. Now either I could have given an output like this, or basically I can write a query which is going to return an output like this, or probably a better meaningful thing would be that I say the quantity is 1, because for O5, 8 is taken, only 1 is basically not available in any batch, right? And same way for O6, that is order 6, 5 are the number of items that is not available in any of the batches, right? So either I can print 1 and 5 here, or null and null. It basically depends on what the recruiter wants. These are the few things that you can talk to the recruiter and tell that I understand the problem, I understand the flow, but I think there is a typo, a particular record is missing in the expected output, and this is how I think the output should look like. Okay, so this is actually valid. If you discuss this, it's actually a positive point when it comes to solving the problem, because at least the interviewer understands that you understand the flow, you understand what needs to be done. Okay, so I hope you guys understand this whole problem statement. Now let's see how we can solve this. Now, as soon as I look at this problem, it's very clear that this is not a basic problem to solve. It's slightly complex. There is probably a logic we will need to build, or some calculations we will need to do. Okay. Now, if you can solve this problem in a different solution than what I'm going to be showing in this video, definitely share your solution in the comments below. Okay. Now, before I can solve this, I want to explain you my thought process. Okay. So as soon as I look at this problem, the first thing that came to my mind was that in my expected output, I have an entry for every order. So ideally, I would write a query which is going to start processing all the records starting from the orders table. So for every record from the orders table, I need to scan the batch table and see which batch I need to consider, right? So for my order O1, I need 2 items, and 2 items are available in batch B1. So I can take it from there. So the remaining items in batch B1 should now be updated to 3, right? Because when I go to the second record in my orders table, I need 8, and for each of this record, that is for the order 2, I again need to go into batch table, and again I need to start from the first batch. But when I start, I should not find B1 as 5, but I should find B1 as 3, right? And that was complex for me, because internally during the processing of the query, I want to change the quantity remaining in the batch table somehow, right? Now, if I had to do this using a function, user-defined function, or by using a procedure, it's very easy for me to do that. I could just loop over my data based on the orders table, and then I could just do these updates, and I could just easily build a logic for that. Okay, but since I need to do all of this in an SQL query, it kind of became more complex if I had to do or solve this problem just by taking the data as is. Okay, and that is why after thinking for some time, I realized that an easier way of solving this problem would be if I could just expand this batch table. So I know that batch B1 has 5 items remaining, right? And batch B2 has 12, and so on and so forth. If I could expand this table such that I'll have 5 records for batch B1, 12 records for B2, and 8 records for B3. And then I will try to figure out how I'm going to tag each of these orders into those batches. Okay. And then let's see if I can come up with some logic based on that. Okay. So with that in mind, first of all, let me expand the batch table and show you how we can build a logic for this. Okay. So I'll put my batch table here. Okay. And let me expand this. In order to expand this, let me move that here. I need 5 records for B5. So I'll just do that. And for B2, I need 12 records. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so I put that here. And for B3, I need 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so let's see if this is fine. Let me just color it differently so you guys can see that. So I have 5 entries for B1. Okay, and this all can probably be 1. Right, and for B2 I think I have 11. Okay, so I have 11 entries. So let me create another record for B2, and now I think I have 12 entries, and all of this should be 1. So I'll just put this as 1, and even here it should be 1. So I'll just do this 1. Okay, and for B3 I think I have 8 entries. Okay, so basically what I meant by expanding is there were 3 records. So B1 has 5, B2 has 12, B3 has 8. I just put each of those items into a separate record in this table. So basically this is what I mean by expanding. Why did I do this? You will see in a short while. Okay. So once I have that, then let me take my orders table as is, and let me just put my orders table here. Okay. Now ideally what I want is, based on the entry that is present in the orders table, I want to tag it to a batch, right? From which batch the items were taken for each order. So I say that for order 1, 2 items are present. So I can say order 1 is taken from the first record of batch 1 and the second item of batch 1. Okay. So my order 1 is basically going to be tagged to B1, right? When I come to order 2, it needs 8. So I'll just put here 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay. So order 2 will be taken from here. Okay. So you can see that for order 2, 3 are taken from B1 and the remaining 5 are taken from B2. And same way for order 3, I just put it here and here. Okay. So all the order 3 is taken from batch 2, right? Same way now for order 4, I can just put it here and I'll just give a different color. And you can see that all the order 4s are taken from batch B2. Okay. When I come to order 5, I need 9 items. So here I'll just put it here, and you can see that the 8 of them are taken from B3, but the last item basically has no available batches, right? And that is why kind of you can say this is null, right? And finally the last order, that is O6, I'll just put it here, and I think it needs 5 and it will be here. Okay, so I'll just tag it to a different color. I hope this makes sense. What I was trying to do, I expanded the batch table, and then based on the entries present in my orders table, I was based on the quantity that is mentioned, I just allocated each of that order here. Okay. Now I think it makes much more sense that if I can somehow come up with a logic to build this in SQL, I think I can solve this problem, right? So how do I come up with this logic? First of all, I will need to expand my batch table, and I think I can easily do that by using recursion. I had actually solved one of previous queries where I tried to expand a table based on some values present. So I need to expand a table based on a particular value present in a column. I can easily do that by using recursion. Okay, and I'm going to show you how to do that. Okay, so once I expand the table, this is fine. So my batch table will be fine. I'll have expanded. Then I also need to come up with these values so that I can tag it to the batch, right? So this is kind of like my expanded values of my orders table. So what I mean to say is I will also need to expand my orders table. Okay. So what I'll do is I'll try to do that here. So let me do that here quickly. So I'll just move this down. Okay. So this is an entry here, and then let me just move this here. So I'll say I need 8 entries for order O2. So 3, 4, 5, and this is 8. And then for order O3, I need 2 entries. Order O4, I need, okay, so O3, I need 2 entries, and order O4, I need 5 entries. I'm going to do that. For order O5, I need 9 entries. I'm going to do that. And then finally for order O6, I need the last 5 entries. Okay, so let me just color this out just to make it more easier for you to see and understand. Okay, and yes, okay, so I think this makes much more sense now. So what I basically did was I expanded my batch table, and then I also expanded my orders table. Okay, so let me just probably remove this. So basically in order to solve this problem, my first step would be to expand these 2 tables. Once I have expanded these 2 tables, I just need to join these 2 tables such that I join it based on each record. So the first record of batch table should join with the first record of the orders table. The first record and the second record of batch table should join with the second record of the orders table, and so on and so forth, right? So first of all, how do I join my batch table with my orders table? There is basically no common column based on which I can join. I cannot join based on batch ID because there will be no join. I cannot join based on order number because again there will be no join. I cannot join based on the quantity. Okay, in fact here the quantity should be 1. I'll just put that quantity as 1 everywhere. Okay, because we expanded our records, right? So here it is 1, and I'll put 1 here as well. Okay, so I cannot basically join based on the quantity as well, right? So I need to somehow come up with some other column or some other way to join this. I initially thought maybe we could use cross join or maybe some other type of join, but then I realized an easier way of joining these two tables, and when I know that I have to join such that every record just joins with the corresponding record of the next table, I can just create a column here. Okay, so what I'll do is I can, using the window function row number function, so I'll just say row number here. I can allocate a basically I can allocate a row number for every record. So I can just tell 1, okay, and I'll just say this plus 1, so this is 2, right? And I'll do the same thing here. Okay, so what basically I did is for every record in the orders table, I gave a unique row number using the row number. I'll try to use the row number window function. And then I did the same for the orders table. Now I can see that this 1 will join with this 2 will join with this, and it will join until 25. Okay. But I know that I also need to have entry for all the remaining orders, which probably will not have any batches available. So that means I will try to do a left join where I'll take my orders table as my left table. Okay, and then join based on the row number. Hopefully I will get my final output, and then finally once I have everything, I'll try to do the aggregation to get the output as it is mentioned here. Okay, so I hope you understand my thought process. You understand the logic that I'm planning to build in SQL. Okay, now with all of this understanding, now let's get into writing the query. So I have basically created the same two tables in my PostgreSQL database. I'm using the PG admin tool. Okay, and you can see I have the match table with 3 records, and I have the orders table with 6 records as mentioned in the problem statement. Okay, so my very first task is, let me just comment out this. And my very first task is to expand the batch table. Now, as I told you, whenever we need to expand a table based on any values that is present, so this is the output of the query that I'm executing here. I hope that is not confusing. You can see that based on each of these values. So I want B1 to expand to 5 records because there is 5 mentioned in the quantity. B12, I need to create 12 records based on this entry. And B3, I need to create 8 records based on this quantity mentioned here. So whenever we have this kind of a requirement where we need to expand a few records into multiple records based on some value present in one of the columns, easiest way of doing that is by using recursion. Okay, and I'm going to do that. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll say with recursive, and I'm just going to give a name for this, like let's say batch split. Okay, so because I'm trying to split this batch table into multiple records, I'm just going to call it like batch split. Okay, and then here I need to have my base query and my recursive part of the query, right? So I'll have my base query, and then I need to have union or union all, and then my recursive query, right? Or recursive part of the query. Okay, now this is kind of like my base query. Okay, now when I say my base query, it basically means in the first iteration only the base query gets executed, right? This is how recursion works. In the second iteration only or basically after the second iteration, the second and so on and so forth, any other iterations, only the recursive part of the query gets executed. So I kind of need my starting point. So in my batch table, you can see that I have 3 different batches. So my starting point would basically be an entry for each of these batches, but I want the quantity to be 1, right? Because if you see here, when I expanded the table, I wanted the quantity to be 1 for every record, right? So what I will do is I'm just going to, okay, remove this comment, and I'm just going to say batch ID, and I'll say quantity, but I know the quantity here is 5, but I know that I want the quantity to be represented as 1 in each record, right? So I'm just going to say 1 as quantity. Okay, so this kind of now becomes my base query. So if I just execute my base query, you can see that I will have entry for all the 3 batches, but the quantity will be 1. So this is my starting point. Okay, and then when I come in my second iteration, I want to create another entry for B1 and until it matches the quantity value, and the same thing for all the other batches, right? So let's see how to do that. So in my recursive part of the query, I'm just going to say select from, I'll just take my CT, that is batch split. I'm going to give an alias for this like CT, and I want to join this with my original batch table. So I'm just going to say batch. I'm going to give an alias B. Okay. So what I'm trying to do is my base query is going to return these entries. Okay. This is my starting point. I want to join it with my batch table. Okay. And I can join it using the batch ID, of course. So I'm just going to mention that. So b dot batch ID equal to ct dot batch ID. That's fine. Additionally, I also want to consider this quantity, because if I don't give the quantity until how many times the iteration should happen, this is going to basically keep on executing endlessly, right? So I want this to execute only until I have generated 5 different records for each batch. Okay, for basically my batch one, right? So how I can do that is by putting a condition here saying that, or maybe I'll just put this here. So I'll just tell b dot quantity, that is probably for b1 it's going to be 5, is greater than the quantity that I get from my CT, right? So that is CTE, or not here, I'll just put that here, CTE dot quantity. Okay, so that is fine, but the problem here is if this condition has to work, then in each iteration this quantity needs to keep on increasing, right? Initially the quantity is 1, so in the second iteration it should probably become 2, in the third iteration it should become 3, and at one stage it's going to become 5, where this condition is going to fail and it's going to come out of my iteration, right? So that is why here I need to mention the columns carefully. So first of all, I'll say b dot batch ID, because I'm joining based on batch ID. So from which table I take batch ID, it doesn't really matter. So I'll just take b dot batch ID. And then when it comes to quantity, what I want to do is in every iteration, my quantity should increase, right? So that this condition will finally fail based on the value that is mentioned in my actual batch table, right? So I'll just increase the quantity by 1 and I'm going to call it like quantity. Okay, so this is my logic that I have built here. Okay, and probably I'll just move this to the next line just to make it more clear to see. Okay, and then as part of the recursion, again I need to write my main query here. So I'll say select star from batch split. Okay, and I think that's fine. Now I need to print all my columns, so I'll just do a star, and now let's see if this works. If I execute, I'm getting an error. Okay, because this quantity is present in both these tables, so I need to mention from which table I'm taking this. So I'll say ct dot quantity. Now if I run this, now you can see that I am getting 25 records. Okay, and let's say if I just order it so that you can see it properly. So order by, let's say 1, and if I run this, now you can see that I have 5 records for batch B1. And if I go into my input, you could see that batch B1 had 5 records. And for B2, I have, I think, okay, so let me do an order by 1, 2. That this basically 1, 2 means the first and the second column, okay, in my query. So I'll just do that. And now for B1, I have 5 entries. For B2, I have 12 entries. And for B3, I have 8 entries, exactly as that is present in my input. Okay, so that means the expansion of the batch table is done successfully, except for one problem. That is, here I have different values, but ideally I wanted every record to only have the quantity as 1, because each record indicates 1 items. If there are 5 records, this will indicate 5 items. Okay, so what I'll do is I'll just say batch ID and I'll say 1 as quantity. Okay, now if I run this, I think this is exactly what I want. Okay, so once I have done this, basically I have expanded my batch table. Now I'm going to do the exact same thing to expand my orders table. Okay, so basically I'm going to reuse the exact query, no difference at all. The only difference will be in the table name and in the column names. So in the second query here, I'm going to replace batch with orders. So batch will get replaced with orders, and here, and then the batch ID will get replaced with order number. So because the orders table has the column as order number, so I'll say order number, this is order number, this is order number, and then order number. And then instead of mentioning batch split, I'm just going to name it like order split, and I'm going to use that everywhere. So order split, and then I think order split. I think that's all. So now if I run this, Now you can see that basically I have successfully expanded my orders table as well. It has generated 31 records as you can see here, right? And this is exactly how I wanted. Okay, so you can see for order 1 there is 2 entries. For order 2 there is I think 8 entries, and so on and so forth. This is exactly how I wanted in my input, right? So the first task of our problem is basically done. I have expanded the batch table and I have expanded the orders table. Okay. The next thing that I need to do is, once I have expanded, in order to join these two tables, I need to add this column that is row number, right? So I'll try to do that now. So what I'll do is, instead of creating another CTE, I'm just going to put this whole thing into a subquery. Okay, so this is my second part. So here I'll just tell select from, I'll open the parenthesis and I'll just move this to the right. Okay, and since I'm putting this whole thing into a subquery, you don't need to use an order by in the subquery, so I'll just remove that and I'm going to give an alias for this subquery here. Okay, and here I'm just going to say select, I need to just fetch what, star, right? And then I need to have my row number, so I'm just going to use the row number window function. So row number over, and here I'll say order by. So I can just order based on batch ID, or in this case, this is for the batch table. So I'll say order by batch ID. I don't need to consider the quantity because quantity is 1 for every record. So I'm just going to say batch ID. Okay. And I'm going to give an alias for this like RN. Okay. So now if I run this, you can see that I have got an additional column here. So this was already generated from this part of the query, right? And then for each of the records here, I basically generated a row number, okay, using the row number window function. And you can see that I have an entry from 1 to 25. This looks fine. Okay. Now the same thing I'll do for the second part of the query, that is for my orders table. So again, I'll just copy this, okay, and I'll put this here. And I'll just move this to the right, and I don't need my order by, so I'll just remove that. I'll put an alias here, X, and I think that's all. So now if I run my orders query, you can see that, okay, I'm getting an error because it's not batch ID, it should be order number. Now if I run this, now you can see that I'm getting 31 records, and again, these two columns were fetched from the inner part of the query, and then I just added a row number for every record here. So I have 31 records. So you can see I have row number until 31. Okay. So basically what this means is I have kind of come up with this table and this table. So the last part of this problem is basically to join these two tables, and let me now try to do that. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'll remove these two queries. I don't need that. Now I could probably put this query and this query into a subquery, but it would kind of become a little messy, I feel. So that is why I'm going to use a CT. So I'm just going to say with batch CTE as, and I'll just move this to the right. Okay, and I'm just going to put this whole thing into a parenthesis, right? And I'm just going to have a comma here, and I'll say my next CT is going to be order CTE as, and then I'll just move this to the right, and I'll put this again into the parenthesis, right? So I created another with clause. I put the whole query as part of my first CT, and then I put my second query as the second CT. I gave batch CT and order CT as the name. And then finally, I need to write my main query. So here I'm just going to say select from, I'll say, okay, I need to join these two tables, right? So I'll say order CT. I'm going to give an alias like O, and I'm going to say left join with batch CTE. I'm going to give an alias like B. Okay, probably I'll need to move into the next line. So, and then I need to join it here. So how do I join it? I can join these two tables based on this row number column, right? So I'm just going to say b.rn equal to o.rn. Okay, and I think that's all. And here, if I just want to display the columns, let me go back to my output. So I need to display order number, batch ID, and quantity. So I'm just going to say o.order number, b.batch ID, and then I'll say b.quantity. Okay, and I think that's all. If I just run this, now you can see that I'm getting 31 records, and let me sort the data so you can clearly see it, order by, and I'm going to sort it based on these two columns. So if I run this now you can see that Okay, so let me just bring this a little to the left and expand this. You can see that I have probably got the output exactly how I wanted. So for the first 25 entries, or for the first 25 items, each of these order items, they have a batch because the batches had those many items available. But for the last 6, you can see it's all null. The batch is null, the quantity is null because it was not available, right, in the warehouse. And I think this is exactly what I wanted in my output. Now this is fine, but I need to aggregate this. Basically, I need to group the order and the batch and then sum the quantity. So I should probably get the output which would look something like this. Okay, so I'm just going to do that. So here, after my left join, I'm just going to say group by. Again, I'm going to group by based on the order number and batch ID, and then the order by can stay as it is. And here, quantity, I'm just going to use the sum aggregate function, and I'm going to give an alias for that like as quantity. Okay, and now if I run this, now you can see that I am getting the 8 records. So for O1, and if you compare this output with the expected output, I think it will be exactly the same. So for O2, 8 records from here, O3 is from here, O4 has 5 from B2, O5 has taken 8 from B3, and then there is one record for O5 with null, and for O6 all is null. Okay, now this is fine, but let's say instead of displaying the quantity as null, because kind of maybe it's not very meaningful, it's better if we would have printed the quantity here, right? What I can do is, instead of fetching the quantity from the B table, that is from my batch table, I could fetch the quantity from the orders table. So I could just put O dot quantity, and now if I run this, it's exactly the same output, but here instead of null, it will display me the quantity that was actually requested from each order. Okay, or basically the quantity for which the batch was not found from each order. Okay, so this is basically my solution. I hope this solution is clear. You guys understand what I did. I not just solved the problem, but I explained you my thought process and how you can solve this. If you like this solution and if you like this problem, definitely leave a feedback in the comments below. Like this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you so much for watching, and see you soon in the next one. Bye.